The Silurian Period, a time when Earth itself was reborn, stretching from 443 million to 419 million years ago. A time when the icy grasp of ancient glaciers loosened their hold on the land, and life surged forward into a new era of wonder. The world we know today, with towering trees, colorful flowers, and soaring birds, did not yet exist. Instead, vast shallow seas sprawled across the continents, underneath a heavy, humid sky tinged with hues of violet and gray. Melting glaciers roared into the oceans, flooding the ancient supercontinents, transforming rocky deserts into shimmering lagoons, and birthing countless new habitats teeming with life. Beneath these restless waters, life flourished in strange and marvelous forms. Tiny plankton swirled in endless spirals, laying the foundation for entire ecosystems. Corals, primitive yet tenacious, anchored themselves to rocky outcrops, building the first great reef systems that would rival the cities of modern times. Along the sandy seafloors, armored fishes wriggled in the mud, while bizarre worm-like creatures slithered into burrows, and towering spires of microbial mats whispered of the planet's deep biological memory. Above it all, in the open waters, swam the ancient hunters and wanderers, creatures that would look utterly alien to modern eyes. Yet each of them was a triumph of survival, adaptation, and primal beauty. It was in this world, silent, otherworldly, and endlessly dynamic, that Earth's first major ecosystems began to stabilize, setting the stage for the explosion of complex life that would follow in the Devonian. But even here, in these shimmering, dreamlike seas, danger lurked in the shadows. Gigantic predators, masters of camouflage, swift killers unseen until it was far too late. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine diving into those ancient waters. The salt thick in the air, the light fractured into kaleidoscopic patterns across the undulating seafloor, the silence broken only by the soft brushing of unseen fins and tentacles in the gloom. This was the Silurian, a living canvas of rebirth, innovation, and terror, where the first whispers of complex life echoed across the endless ocean plains. And now, let us descend deeper, into the realms ruled by the monstrous Eurypterid, the armored lords of an ancient, forgotten sea. Beneath the shifting, emerald waves of the Silurian seas, an ancient terror stirred, powerful, silent, and deadly beyond imagination. Eurypterids, better known today as sea scorpions, were not mere wanderers of the shallow waters. They were apex predators, masters of a world few living things dared to challenge. Picture a creature larger than a grown man, its body plated with thick, interlocking armor, gleaming in shades of bronze and obsidian as sunlight filtered down through the water. Its head, broad and shield-like, housed two immense, compound eyes that could detect even the faintest flicker of movement across the seafloor. In front, two massive pincers extended, curved and razor-sharp, built not merely to grab, but to crush, tear, and dismember prey with terrifying efficiency. Some species of Eurypterid were modest in size, only a few centimeters long. Others, like the mighty Pterygotus, could stretch nearly 2.5 meters from claw to tail. A titan among predators, their legs were not designed for sluggish crawling. They moved with an unsettling speed, kicking up clouds of silt as they surged forward toward the next kill. The two rear legs were often flattened into broad paddles, allowing Eurypterids to swim with swift, gliding strokes, making them capable hunters both on the seabed and in open water. Fossilized tracks, faint, delicate imprints left in ancient mud, tell the story of their relentless movement. Short, rapid strides interspersed with bursts of swimming power, silent assassins slipping between patches of coral and swaying fronds of early seaweed. As fearsome as they were, Eurypterids were not invincible. The Silurian oceans were teeming with other dangers, and sometimes, Eurypterids themselves fell prey to even larger cousins or fearsome cephalopods lurking in the depths. Yet their greatest strength lay not just in raw physicality, but in their adaptability. Some evolved armor thick enough to shrug off attacks from rival predators. Others developed more streamlined bodies, favoring speed and stealth over brute force. And their hunting methods, far from mindless aggression, Eurypterids demonstrated calculated patience, lying in ambush, half buried in the sand, waiting for the perfect moment to strike with blinding speed. Imagine the scene, a school of tiny, armored fish drifting near the reef, A sudden shift in the sand, a burst of motion, and before the fish can react, a giant claw clamps down, dragging the victim into a waiting mouth armed with serrated edges. Some scientists speculate that Eurypterids might have even engaged in battles for dominance among themselves, grappling with the titanic pincers in violent, thrashing struggles on the ocean floor. Their reign over the Silurian waters would last millions of years, before giving way to new titans in the ever-turning wheel of evolution. But their legacy, carved into stone, and whispered through eons of fossilized sediment, remains as a haunting testament to the sheer power of ancient life. They were not monsters, nor mindless beasts. They were masterpieces of nature's fierce creativity, and for a time, the Eurypterids ruled the Earth's oceans unchallenged. In the twilight depths of the Silurian seas, where sunlight dwindled into a shimmering gloom, another ancient titan drifted silently through the currents. The Orthocones, masters of stealth and silent death. Their presence was like that of living shadows sliding through the ancient waters. Picture an enormous, conical shell, as long as a small boat, tapering to a fine point at the end, a marvel of symmetry and evolutionary engineering. Emerging from the wide end of the shell was the creature's soft body, a mass of tentacles, gleaming and powerful, wreathed around a razor-sharp beak capable of snapping prey in half. They were early relatives of today's squids and octopuses, but Orthocones were far more alien in appearance, rigid, armored, and built for a world that demanded both strength and precision. Floating almost vertically in the water column, they could hover effortlessly, adjusting their buoyancy using internal chambers within their shell. Each chamber, filled or emptied of gas and liquid at will, acted like a fine-tuned ballast system, a living submarine cruising through the prehistoric seas. Orthocones were not fast hunters like the Eurypterids. Instead, they were patient executioners, floating still for hours, blending with drifting debris or vertical kelp like seaweeds, waiting for unsuspecting prey to venture too close. Their tentacles, armed with tiny suction cups or hooks, could lash out with frightening speed, seizing small fish, trilobites, or even careless Eurypteridae juveniles. The attack was swift and brutal, tentacles entwining, pulling the struggling victim toward the hidden, bone-crushing beak. A sharp snap, and the prey was gone, consumed in moments. In life, they would have been almost ghostly to behold, their shells reflecting dappled light in eerie, shifting patterns, their movements silent and almost hypnotic. A slow, inevitable glide through alien waters. And yet, for all their deadly grace, Orthocones were not without enemies. Some larger Eurypterids could tear through their vulnerable tentacles if they were caught unawares. And immense armored fishes, ancestors of future sharks, were beginning to rise as formidable threats in deeper waters. Thus, Orthocones evolved a countermeasure: distance. They maintained a careful vertical separation from the main hunting zones, staying just outside the reach of terrestrial predators, exploiting a three-dimensional battlefield unlike anything seen before. Their evolutionary success was astonishing. Orthocone species would survive not just through the Silurian, but deep into the later Paleozoic periods, diversifying into dozens, even hundreds, of forms, from tiny darting hunters to slow, colossal giants stretching over 9 meters long. Imagine encountering one today, a gleaming, endless spire drifting out of the gloom, tentacles unfurling like the petals of some otherworldly flower. And at the center, a cold, calculating eye observing you with prehistoric indifference. In their prime, Orthocones commanded both awe and terror across the Silurian oceans, a reminder that survival is not always about brute force. Sometimes, it is the patient, the silent, and the unseen who dominate the world. While Eurypterids and Orthocones ruled the grand stage of the Silurian seas, they were not alone. Beneath the shifting currents and amidst the coral labyrinths, a host of other bizarre and incredible creatures thrived in silent defiance of extinction. Some were ancient survivors, others, bold newcomers in the grand evolutionary experiment of life, each more peculiar and more fascinating than the last. DNA anomalocarid relatives, echoes of the Cambrian nightmares. Though the great anomalocaris of the Cambrian had long vanished, their distant relatives, descendants of terror incarnate, still patrolled the deeper currents of the Silurian. Sleeker, smaller, but no less deadly, these predators wielded spiked, grasping appendages before their mouths, able to snatch and tear apart soft-bodied prey with horrifying efficiency. Their compound eyes, mosaics of thousands of lenses, granted them nearly 360-degree vision, perfect for spotting prey darting amongst the growing coral gardens. Their undulating, finned bodies allowed them to glide like living missiles through the murky waters, vanishing and striking with hypnotic grace. Though no longer the uncontested apex predators, they remained living relics of a more brutal time, ghosts of a forgotten evolutionary arms race. Seedling Cooksonia, the first green colonists. But life's strangeness wasn't confined to the oceans alone. On the damp, rocky coastlines, something even more extraordinary stirred. Cooksonia, a name almost lost to history, represents humanity's first glimpse of a radical new idea: land plants. Tiny, no more than a few centimeters tall, leafless, with simple branching stems and spore capsules perched atop like ancient lanterns. They looked fragile, almost laughably delicate compared to the monsters of the sea. Yet in their simplicity, Cooksonia achieved something profound. They conquered the land, drawing moisture from the soil, releasing oxygen into the thick, heavy atmosphere. They began the slow, relentless transformation of Earth's surface from barren rock to green, breathing landscapes. Without Cooksonia and its kin, forests would never have risen, dinosaurs would never have roamed, humans would never have walked the earth. In the great tapestry of evolution, sometimes the smallest threads weave the most enduring legacies. Fish, the first armored fish, Earth's earliest knights. Back in the seas, another revolution brewed. Fish, those icons of modern aquatic life, were taking their first tentative steps onto the evolutionary stage. But they looked nothing like the sleek swimmers we know today. Meet the placoderms, the armored fish. Their heads and thoraxes were encased in bony plates like natural helmets. Their jaws primitive but powerful, lined with sharp, bony ridges instead of true teeth. Small placoderms, barely the size of a man's hand, scuttled across reef floors, using their heavy bodies both for defense and to root through sediment for food. Others, like the early Dunkleosteus ancestors, hinted at the future leviathans to come, powerful predators that would someday terrorize the Devonian seas with bite forces unrivaled for hundreds of millions of years. In the Silurian, however, they were still humble, clumsy, heavily armored pioneers of a future ruled by jaws and speed. Their presence marked a turning point. Predators were no longer limited to pincers or tentacles. Teeth, and the power of the bite, were beginning to change the game forever. Milky Way strange drifters, the otherworldly life of the open seas. Farther from the reef and coastlines, in the open ocean's drifting blue voids, floated bizarre creatures beyond imagination. Giant jellyfish-like forms, billowing through the waters, trailing tendrils dozens of meters long. Soft-bodied worms, coiled in iridescent spirals, moving in slow, hypnotic dances through the planktonic haze. Primitive arthropods, transparent and delicate, fluttering with dozens of shimmering limbs. So alien that even today, paleontologists can barely classify them. The Silurian open seas were not empty deserts. They were surreal, living dreamscapes, where forms flickered between familiar and nightmarish at the whim of evolution. Every creature, from the tiniest plankton to the monstrous Eurypteridae, from the drifting Orthocone to the fragile Cooksonia, played their part in a world ceaselessly reshaping itself. Each adaptation, each bizarre body, each strange survival tactic, was another brushstroke on the grand canvas of life. A masterpiece millions of years in the making. And so, as the Silurian sun dipped beneath alien horizons, the world held its breath, waiting for the next great chapter in the story of life to unfold. The Silurian seas, so full of strange wonders, of towering predators and delicate pioneers, were not destined to last forever. As millions of years slipped by, slow, almost imperceptible changes began to reshape the planet once again. The continents, restless on the tectonic journeys, shifted and collided, forging new mountain ranges, disrupting the shallow seas that had cradled so much early life. Climate patterns twisted and turned. Periods of warming and cooling pulsed across the globe like the slow beating of an ancient heart, forcing life to adapt or perish. Some reefs collapsed into murky lagoons. Others rose into sun-baked islands, their coral inhabitants left to bleach and die under a pitiless sun. The armored titans of the seas, the Eurypterids, faced greater competition from the rapidly evolving jawed fishes. Their once unquestioned dominion challenged by new hunters faster, sleeker, and more ruthless than anything the Silurian had ever seen. The mighty Orthocones, masters of vertical stealth, now found their silent waters invaded by faster, smarter prey, and by new predators that could outmaneuver their slow, drifting strategies. Even the sturdy Cooksonia, which had once clung triumphantly to rocky shores, now struggled against the dry, shifting soils as Earth's surface began to crack and rise. The ancient world was ending, not in fire, not in sudden cataclysm, but in the slow, inevitable march of change. And yet, from this upheaval, would rise something truly magnificent. DNA: the rise of new giants. The first great forests, dark, towering cathedrals of wood and leaf, began to sprout from the stubborn descendants of Cooksonia. Shallow seas gave birth to monstrous armored fishes, like Dunkleosteus, whose bone-crushing jaws would dominate the Devonian. The first amphibians, courageous pioneers with lungs and limbs, began to edge nervously from the rivers and lakes, tasting the alien air of the land for the very first time. Evolution, ever tireless, spun 1,000 new threads from the fading tapestry of the Silurian, weaving them into something richer, grander, and even more unpredictable. The Silurian was not a failure. It was a bridge from the simple worlds of the past to the complex, riotous kingdoms of the future. Milky Way echoes in stone. Today, the Silurian lives on, not in the creatures themselves, but in their echoes, trapped within stone, fossils whispering forgotten secrets from the depths of time. Every Eurypterid claw fossilized in ancient shale, every fragment of an Orthocone shell embedded in limestone, every trace fossil of a tiny armored fish wriggling through primeval mud. They are messages from a world both alien and familiar, a reminder that life, in all its beauty and brutality, has always been, and will always be, a story of adaptation, struggle, and wonder. So the next time you walk along a rocky shore, or gaze into a quiet, endless sea, remember, beneath your feet, across the waves, and deep within the earth itself, the Silurian still hums, a song of ancient seas, of forgotten monsters, of life's eternal, unstoppable journey.